going to get into Photoshop, this little PS program. Now, Photoshop is pixel-based, which means little squares of color. So the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up a new document. Because new document tells you a lot about a program, right? When you open up a new document in Illustrator, it basically asks you for the color mode and the size of the document. But we're going to see some different things when you open up a new document in Photoshop. Photoshop's going to ask you a few more hard-hitting questions. Well, it'll give you the basics like, what size document do you want to create here? What color mode do you want it to be? Remember, RGB is for screen-based design, and CMYK is if you're going to print it on a piece of paper. We're going to build a lot of little web solutions in here, little web ads and everything. So we'll do RGB as our color mode. We'll do a basic, let's do an 8x8 document in inches. So make sure your settings are set to inches. We'll make a little square here. Now, resolution is the next kind of question you have to answer when you open up a new document. So just give you an idea of resolution, or pixels per inch. 72 pixels is what's considered low resolution or screen-based resolution. High resolution is 300 little squares of color per inch. And then somewhere in the middle, around 150 to 203 is kind of, it's really good or good enough for most applications. We're going to set ours to 150, kind of middle of the road, because we're going to see when we download images from the web, they're tied to resolution. And sometimes it's really hard to get a really good picture. The good news for this year, this time in technology, is that your phone is awesome. Your phone takes really good pictures. I was joking with the ad design class. I follow baseball, and my favorite baseball team made the postseason. And one of the guys had a $50 DoorDash camera sent to the stadium when he realized that they were going to clinch to make the playoffs and they were going to have a party and all the good things. And I actually posted in their announcement, can you tell me which picture was taken with the $50 DoorDash camera and which picture was taken with the professional photographer the team has that travels with the team and took pictures also? I can't really tell the difference. I mean, you have a $5,000 camera from the team's photographer, and you have a $50, in essence, digital disposable camera that probably came from CVS. And the lighting, the champagne, like the water and everything all over the place, that does distort the images a little bit. You couldn't tell the difference. I mean, nowadays you have a professional camera in your pocket with your phone. So that's pretty awesome. So it comes down to really composition now, because everyone kind of has the same playing field. You can get a cheap camera and it takes as good of pictures resolution-wise as a super fancy camera. Yeah, the super fancy camera has filters and has aperture, and you can reset things, and you let more light in, turn more light down. You put filters on your lens. Fancy cameras do have extra stuff. But quite honestly, even the cheapest of cameras, and I don't want to say the phone's cheapest of cameras because not phones are $1,000, but even the cheapest of cameras, you can take really high quality pictures. So we have less to worry about in that area now, and just more to worry about with how do we manipulate those pixels, how do we make something interesting. All right, so let's make sure our background is white, which you might know is artboard in Illustrator, right? Artboard. In here it's called a canvas, and there's some differences to it, the functionality of it compared to Illustrator as far as pasteboard and things like that go. But okay, 8x8, 150, RGB, white background. And let's click Create. And we're going to get the little wheels cranking. Let's do Command minus so that you can see your entire canvas area. So we'll do Command minus just to make sure we can see the whole box here. Now, because we're dealing with Mountain Day and all the fun things apparently that happen around that, I was watching a video that Barry posted on, I think it was LinkedIn or one of those last night. Just give me a little background. This will be my first experience in the Mountain Day experience, which I'm looking forward to. I thought we would would just take some baby images and play around with them and bring stuff in and manipulate them a little bit. So let's go out to Google and let's do a search just for Barry College and let's see what we get. And then I'll show you about organizing image size, doing basic searches, things like that. So let's go out to the old Barry College. Make sure you spell it right. So let's go out and we're searching Barry College. Now you may or may not know when you do an internet search that we have to go to the images tab up there. So let's do that first. The old images tab. And I do love Chrome, so I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of a Chrome guy. I don't know if you're Firefox, Safari, there's a million of them out there now. I do love Chrome. I guess it's just because it integrates with my Gmail so easily. Okay, so once you click on images, you see there's a little thing that says Tools over in the top navigation bar, kind of where it says Maps, News, Video, Shops, Forum, and you see Tools. Let's click on Tools. And let's make sure that the size of the images that we receive are large, because we are tied to pixels here. So we have to have images that have pixels, not 300 wide. We need like 1,000, 1,200, 1,400, 2,000 pixels. Because remember, it's little squares of color per inch. So we need 150 little squares of color per inch. So that means we need to have some pretty big pictures. Now, I did notice when you search, you get the Ford complex for about 8,000 of the images, which is interesting. So we might as well see if we can't find one of those that's pretty high quality that we will use as our first layer in Photoshop so we can look at pixels. So I'm going to click on this little image here, and I just want to see if I move my mouse over the thumbnail that appears. See how it says 1600 by 900? We need an image that's over 1,000 pixels. So I don't care which image you pick, because we're going to build images on top of it. But we need to have something that is at least 1,000 pixels wide, because we have a pretty big document here. Now, you may or may not know that, especially in Mac world, you find a picture, you click on the thumbnail, you get the properties of the picture over on the right-hand side, and then you can just take the picture and dump it on the desktop. Just drag and dump it on the desktop. If you're doing a web image search, more than likely you're going to get a couple of file formats. JPEG, PNG, now there's WEBP. There's a couple of file formats that are really popular. Every once in a while you'll get a GIF. JPEGs are compressed images, so they're really good for the web. PNG, network graphics, those are also compressed for the web or for screen resolution, but they have transparency built into them. And what does transparency mean? Anyone know? The image has transparency. It has a background that you can see through. So it has a background that you can see through. That's really important, because if you're looking for an image to manipulate in Photoshop and you want to make it easy on yourself, you add transparent background to your internet search. So like if we're looking for a logo to add to an advertisement, we type in the company name and add transparent background to our image search. We're going to get PNGs and GIFs which have no background. So when we copy them and bring them in to Photoshop, they have literally no background. So they look seamless when you bring them into your picture. So transparent background is important. They come in PNGs and GIFs. JPEGs are what you're probably going to see the most of. A new compression rate that's coming out, file format, the WEBP, has quite a little bit higher resolution quality, like color saturation, and so it allows you for a little greater detail in your image. I will say that Adobe doesn't always play very well with those quite yet, because like any software, it has to evolve as technology evolves, and as new file extensions come out, you get new kind of hurdles that the software has to jump over. You can use raw camera formats in Photoshop too. More times than not, you probably won't be pressing that. So let's just grab a picture, drag it out to the desktop, make sure it's at least 1,000 pixels wide. Now, we can open that image in Photoshop, and let's just minimize our browser so that we have it for a later search. So you can open up the image in Photoshop one of two ways. You can go to File, Open inside of Photoshop and navigate to the desktop and pick that file. Or you can take the file and drag it down to the little PS icon in your dock, which is what that little strip at the bottom of the screen with all the icon means. That is called the dock, and you can, in essence, force launch it inside that program. The only thing I do not want you to do is drag the image and drop it right into the canvas of your Photoshop file, because that will make that a smart object, which means we don't have access to the pixels. It freezes the image. There's a ways around that, but for the sake of Photoshop Day 1, let's just do File, Open. And let's navigate to the desktop, and let's open up that image. And there it is. Why is my image so itty bitty? Well, we're going to learn something about pixels here really quickly. I might have picked one that is embedded inside of a system. So let's just grab another one, just for the sake of the process. Aha! Much better. Sometimes they hide pictures inside of the web application that it's pulling the image search from, and it only allows you to take the thumbnail, which is what happened there with mine. All right, so you should have a picture that opens up pretty big. If you don't have a picture that opens up pretty big, it might have forced you to download the thumbnail, which will only give you like 600 pixels instead of 1600 pixels wide. So let's make sure we have something that's pretty big. So you'll notice in my tab up there, which you also have a tab giving the properties of the document, that you should, even if it's really big, be like 50%, 66%, 75%. If you open it up 100% and you can see the entire image inside the Photoshop, that means that the resolution is dialed down a little bit. It's a little bit smaller. Okay, I want you to do Command plus and zoom in as far as you can. So Command plus, zoom in as far as you can. Aha! The definition of pixels. Yes. Photoshop is a very simple program. You have to select those, modify those, adjust those, transform those, delete those. That's it. That's all Photoshop is. It's these little squares of color based on how many there are, and you have to do something with those squares of color. And Photoshop gives you a lot of tools to do something with those little squares of color. Now, if you zoomed in and you have like a dark area image and then a light area of your image, the transition between dark to light is really important because that helps you to select what you have inside of your photo. So that kind of is our guide area for selecting inside of our image. Now, let's go ahead and do a Command minus. So Command plus to zoom in, Command minus to zoom out. Now, the toolbar, just like Illustrator, Illustrator had a selection arrow which was black and a direct select arrow that was white. In Photoshop, you have a move tool, which is the very top little symbol that looks kind of like a compass thing, has some arrows pointing left and right, has some arrows pointing top and bottom, kind of moves things around. Similar to the global selection arrow or the black arrow inside of Illustrator. You are selecting layers, whatever the pixels are on that layer. You're not selecting individual pixels inside of any given image with the move tool. You're just moving what the layer is. Which brings us to the question of layer. And layer is over on the right-hand side palette of Photoshop. It is similar to the layers that are in Illustrator from the sense of we had a template layer, we had a drawing layer, we made a color layer. So we made stacks of pieces of paper in Illustrator based on the objects we were drawing. The difference in Photoshop is every object you bring into Photoshop becomes a layer. So you got to be comfortable with the idea that every single thing we bring into Photoshop is its own thing. unless we merge things together or group things. Everything is its own piece of paper. And that is the hardest thing for any student that's learning Photoshop for the first time. I keep clicking this thing, and it won't let me grab this thing. Well, that's because you're clicking on not the layer of that thing, but you're on a different layer. So that's number one. That's going to be the hardest thing. Number two is when we bring in objects into one document, we need to name our layers. Because Photoshop traditionally, when you're making something, could have 50 layers, 30 layers, 100 layers. And if you don't name them, it's really hard. It's kind of like in Illustrator when you drew a bunch of shapes and it was shape 1 or path 2, and you were like, oh, where's the circle, right? Where's the thing I drew? So Photoshop is every single thing is a piece of paper, and every piece of paper should be named. So those are really best practices as we start to learn Photoshop. Okay. The second tool are marquee tools. And by marquee tools, they mean selection boxes. Ways to select those little squares of color inside your image. So we zoomed in, we saw the little squares of color. Now we have to select them. You have to select them to manipulate them. Right now they're just there. We haven't told Photoshop to do anything with them. So the first thing we have to do is learn how to select pixels. So the second tool in your toolbar should be set to rectangular marquee. If it is not, click your mouse and hold it down, and you will see the selection shaped boxes inside of tool number 2, which are the marquee tools. So let's pick rectangular marquee tool. Rectangular marquee tool. So we'll pick that one. Now, this allows us to select an area of the image. And when we select an area image, those pixels are the things we can manipulate. Now, I want you to take the marquee tool, rectangular, and just draw a big box over the entire thing. Big box over the entire thing. Now, when you draw a big box over the entire thing, which is also Command A, which is select all, it will give you these little dancing lines around it that are called marching ants. Those little marching ants are selecting that area of the image. Obviously, if we would have drawn a smaller box inside of the image, we would have only selected the pixels inside of that box. But we need the whole set of pixels because we're going to copy those pixels and paste them into our untitled document. So let's do that. Let's do either Command C or Edit Copy from the drop down. Now, just like Illustrator, learning some short key commands is a good idea. So let's do Command C to copy. So Command C is to copy. All right, so let's go into our untitled document, and let's do Command V. And you should get that. A big image inside of your canvas. Now, something you may now notice that is different than Illustrator, can you see the whole picture? No. Click on your Move tool and move that image around a little bit. So click on the top tool, which is the Move tool, and move that thing around a little bit. Do all the pixels of the image exist? They do, right? You can see them right here.
Just blocked by the paste board.
Just blocked by the paste board. The difference between Photoshop and Illustrator is, in Illustrator, can you see the objects you created on the paste board? Yep, you can. We used it to make notes. This was the font we used. We made little shapes over on the side and then moved them into the artboard. If I was to save or export this image, would you see what's on the paste board? You would not. You are cropped by the document. So anything out there, outside of our document edge, does exist, but when you export the image, it in essence crops it down to the size of your document. So if you delete pixels inside of your artboard, it doesn't mean, or canvas, it doesn't mean that the pixels don't still exist outside of the artboard. That's an important thing to just kind of know and understand. Now, a really important aspect of Photoshop. You can scale down. You really can't scale up because these are pixel-based objects. which means when you scale something up, it in essence doubles the pixels around each pixel in order to make the image bigger. Well, if you know anything about painting, it makes the pixels like a paintbrush daub in every color transition. So very quickly you start getting a Van Gogh out of your image because all these pixels start getting doubled up and the shapes aren't tight, they start getting blotchy. That's why you get images that are blurry. So if you ever look at an ad in a newspaper, a magazine, on the web, and it's blurry, it's because the person that created that thing didn't understand that you really can't scale up inside a photo program. You can scale down perfectly. Scale up, not so much. Now, if your image doesn't completely fill that canvas, but there's just a tiny little bit of light, you can get away with a slight scale up. Not a big, not like double the size. But if you needed like a 5% adjustment, just make it a little bit bigger so it fits the space that you're in, you're okay. You just can't blow the thing up when it's little. That's why resolution is so important. Now, if you use your move tool and click on that image, you get that box. What is that box called? Bounding box. It's a bounding box. The same box that was in Illustrator. What properties are attached to the bounding box? Scale. What's the other one? Rotate. Scale and rotate. The bounding box in all Adobe programs is a box with white squares. The white squares are called handles, and it has scale and rotate. Scale and rotate in every bounding box in all Adobe programs. So when we do InDesign, you're going to have scale and rotate. When you do Adobe Animate, we're going to have scale and rotate. And every single program has a bounding box when you select an object. So if we want to scale this thing proportionately, which means not stretch it to fix our document, which is really best practice number one, you need to grab the corner of the bounding box and hold down Shift. I like to also hold down Option and scale this thing proportionately. Yes.
How do you make the bounding box appear on the...
So click on your object layer, and if you don't have it, right up here is a little Show Transform Controls. That's actually a default feature, but someone probably was in your Photoshop and turned it off. So let's turn that on, and then let's grab the corner. Let's drag. And let's hit return, because every feature you do inside of Photoshop requires you to hit the return key. Because Photoshop won't do anything to the pixels you're manipulating without you telling it, yes, I definitely want to do this. Yes? Yep. Check that box right up there. Perfect. Grab that corner. Just hold down Option. You can scale from the middle. Drag up the corner bounding box handle, not the middle one, the middle one. And then just make it really big. If you have to do Command minus, do Command minus to zoom out a little bit so that you can see your image box is big enough that you can make it as big as you need to, and then you hit Enter. Now, you'll notice that when we did File New, it gave us a white canvas called Background that is locked, and then it gives us layer number 1. Now, we need to start naming our layers as we bring objects in, because that's how you organize kind of foreground to background and object to object. So if you move your mouse over to layer number 1 over there in your layers palette, and you double click on the name layer number 1, double click on the name layer number 1, it should turn blue. If you double click in the gray area of layer number 1, you are going to get its layer properties. So don't do that. Just double click on the name, and we will name this forward, or whatever your image is. So whatever picture you took off the internet, let's just name it that image. So we'll name it forward for me, and I'll hit Enter. Naming layers, naming objects is very important in Adobe, because when you start importing one file into another program, it will separate it by its objects or its layers. So if you name the objects, it will bring them in what's called a symbol environment. And symbol environments means that the objects are grouped and they have a name and a behavior attached to them. So naming things is really important, spelling them correctly, because when you bring objects into other programs, it organizes them in a library called a symbol library, and it attaches behaviors to them. So when you bring a Photoshop file in, all of these layers become bracket symbols, and you can manipulate them, and they're organized by their name. So try not to leave anything as layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or object 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or path 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Try to name things when we're in programs, because it will make it easier later in life if you have a name attached to them. Okay, now let's go out and find another picture, because we have to do a different selection process. So let's go back to our internet search. And I'm going to see if I can find something not forward complex thing. Here's a nice picture of the old mill, so let's make sure that one is big. Oh yeah, it's beautiful. 1900 pixels. So you can grab any image you want. Let's try to do different images, because we're going to cut out deer. We're going to bring some bear into here. We're going to bring the logo in. We're going to bring some different things in so you can see different selection tools and selection processes. So let's just grab a second picture. Let's minimize our browser and go ahead and drag that down to the PS icon in your dock, or do File, Open, and bring it in. And you'll notice this also comes in with a locked background, which means we can't move it. Find something decent. This mill picture is 1900 pixels. I feel like I have one on there. That's like a really good image. Now, instead of the rectangular marquee tool, we're going to use the elliptical marquee tool. So let's go into our second toolbar tool. So you have the rectangular one turned on. Let's click on the mouse and hold the mouse down and go to elliptical. Because elliptical is exactly what it sounds like. We can draw an oval. If we hold down shift, we can draw a circle. So let's hold down shift and let's draw a circle. Obviously this is a rectangular picture, so we can't select all the pixels with the elliptical tool because it's round and this is square. So let's just draw a selection box around a portion of the picture in a perfect circle. So just click and hold down shift, and you're going to get these little marching ants in the shape of a circle. We are only right now selecting the pixels inside of that circle. So if there's ever a time where you draw a shape and you have a selection box created or a selection shape and you did not get everything in the picture that you wanted, you can always do select, deselect, or just take your mouse and tap outside of the canvas area. So if you don't like your selection or you didn't draw one big enough or whatever the case may be, you can always do select, deselect from the drop-down menu, or you can tap your mouse outside of the canvas or image area. So I'm going to hold down shift and draw another circle. Now, once the circle is drawn, if you move your mouse inside the circle, you can move your selection around. So go ahead and draw a decent sized circle by holding down shift with the elliptical marquee tool, and then move your mouse inside of the marching ants and kind of move the circle around so you get most of the image that you're like, ooh, I like that part of the picture. Because we're going to copy that part of the picture and bring it into our untitled document. So once you have that circle kind of created and you're like, yeah, this looks amazing, let's do Command C. So Command C. Let's go to our untitled document and do Command V. Now, these are pieces of paper. So you probably noticed that part of now layer number 1 is covering up part of means transparent. So if you ever open an image up inside the internet and you drag that image to the desktop and it has a checkerboard around it, it means it's transparent around it. Now you know what transparent looks like, right? So if you bring in a transparent object and you have something behind it, you now have a perfect cutout of that object inside of Photoshop. That's why stock photography sites sell tons of images on white backgrounds, because it's really easy to select an object out of a white background, just like shooting on a green screen. Right? Shooting on the green screen is because you can drop that superhero that's flying to the sky into a video and it looks like they're flying in the sky. Same scenario here. So transparency or white backgrounds are really key when you're manipulating images inside of Photoshop. Makes life a little bit easier if it has a white background or it's transparent. Okay, so let's switch back to our move tool. And we can click and move this object around, right? It also has the bounding box if you have the show transform controls turned on. So let's grab the corner of the bounding box. Just hold down Option so that we can scale from the middle and make this image a little bit smaller. So let's grab the corner, hold down Option, we're going to scale from the middle. Now let go of the mouse before you let go of Option, so you make sure you scale this thing proportionately from the middle. So let's make it a little bit smaller, and let's hit Return, or Enter. Let's rename layer number 1 to whatever that new layer subject is you brought in. Like mine's Mill, so I'm going to write Mill. Or whatever that thing is, let's rename it. Now, let's say we had multiple layers in our Photoshop file and we didn't like what parts of each image we could see and we wanted to change the pieces of paper. So let's take the mill layer and let's just click our mouse on the gray area of the mill layer and drag it down and put it underneath the forward layer. This is the hardest part about Photoshop. I can't see it. Well, why can't I see it? Because when I copied and pasted my object in to compose my design, I had a layer underneath the layer I wanted it. And so when I pasted it, it's like this. So I have to move my pieces of paper so that the objects that I want in the foreground are on the top and the objects I want on the background are on the bottom. There's pieces of paper, but you have to stack them accordingly. So when I use Photoshop, I actually build background to foreground in my brain. What's the image that's going to take up the whole design? Let's bring that in first. What image is going to be the thing that sits on top of that thing in the background? Let's bring that in second. So instead of having to reorganize all the time, I actually build background to middle ground to foreground. And foreground traditionally is the type that I put inside of what I'm trying to message. So the very last thing I add is type in my composition. So let's move that mill layer back up above forward so that we can actually see it. Now, I want you to take your elliptical marquee tool and I want you to draw a box over outside of the image that you have inside your layer. So just draw a selection box away from it, somewhere over there, and hit the delete key. What happened?
Nothing.
Nada. Why nada?
Just, yeah, click deselect.
You have to do what?
Click deselect.
Yes. We would have to deselect to do something else. Why is it not deleting any of the pixels over there? Wrong layer. Wrong layer. We're on the wrong layer. There are no pixels on the mill layer in the corner of that document. So you can hit delete all you want. There is nothing over there. Now, if we click to the forward layer and hit delete,
It makes a hole.
big white circle. Big white circle. The reason it makes a big white circle is because what's underneath the forward layer? The background.
White background.
Yep, white background. So just remember, we're starting with a white piece of paper, and we're stacking all the piece of papers on top of the white piece of paper. So if you want to select something in a certain piece of paper, that piece of paper has to be selected. Now, Photoshop did throw a little wrench into the process, which I don't love, and they added smart selection, which means if you have your move tool and you mistakenly click on an object inside of your document, it jumps to that layer, instead of forcing you to click the layer in the layers palette. That's good because you can move things around really quickly without having to click over in the layers palette. The bad is if you use your move tool and tap on something by mistake, you may select that layer and start manipulating that layer, and you actually wanted the one underneath it. But because it's smart, it tries to be smart for you, and it picks objects that that the computer or the software thinks you want to select, even though it might not be the thing you want to select. So just keep that in mind. We're stacking pieces of paper on top of pieces of paper. Okay. All right. So what do we have to do to deselect?
That's the deselect button.
Tap the mouse anywhere outside the document. So take your mouse while you have your elliptical tool selected and just tap it anywhere outside the document, and the circle should go away. You can also do select, deselect from the drop-down menu. Does the same thing, it's just easier to tap your mouse outside of the pasteboard. All right, very good. Are we okay? Everybody okay? Copying and manipulating pixels. All right, so let's go into our shape selection tools. So we have the elliptical tool and we have the rectangular marquee tool right in here. So now we have single row and single column. I have to be honest with you, I very rarely ever use either of these two, because all it does is draw a vertical or horizontal stripe 1 pixel tall that you can then do something with. Why would I even want to do something with 1 pixel tall or 1 pixel wide across the entire document? If I wanted to add a little stripe of color, like if I wanted to just underline something, I could draw 1 stripe of pixels and add some color to that, and it would make it kind of a stripe through the page. I very rarely ever use any of those. But it does bring up an interesting question, which are these little squares of color at the bottom of your toolbar. What are they in Illustrator?
Stroke and fill.
Yes, fill and stroke. Absolutely. Fill and stroke. In Photoshop, they are foreground and background. And you'll notice by our File New document that the bottom right-hand square is white. Just like when we did File New and we told it to make it a white canvas. So background is white. Traditionally, background is white is the default and the thing you should do. Now, there are some exceptions, and that's if you want to make something like duotone, which means just yellow and white, or just yellow and white, or red and white. You can create documents in Photoshop where you make the background the color you want it to be, and then you can layer the whites on top of it, or the blacks on top of it, or whatever that second color is to duotone. So whatever the background color is, plus the other color. So if you wanted black, and you just wanted to bring red images up on top of it, you could use the canvas, where the background color is black. So that could be any color. Now, the foreground color, in essence, is fill. In essence, is fill. It allows you to add color into a shape, paint color with brushes, do all those sorts of things using that. There isn't a stroke square on that toolbar. The stroke is a property you add to the object after you create it. And we will see that at a later date. So only foreground and background. So really, honestly, the thing you have to worry about is foreground. If you ever want to add type, the foreground color. If you ever want to draw or fill a shape, the foreground color. That's the color that dominates in Photoshop. The background is the bottom piece of paper. That does come in play when we do masking and things like that. But by nature, foreground is important, background is default white. Now, let's move down to the next tool, which is the lasso tools. So we'll just go with the standard old lasso. Let's get another picture. This time, let's see if we can find a picture of, so we got Ford, we kind of probably got the mill or something like that. Let's see if we can get some nature, like a picture of some trees or one of the fields or, you know, something that we can manipulate with our shape drawing tools, which are our lasso tools. So I'm going to go down here, and we're still doing the old berry thing. So let's see what we have here. See if I find something that feels a little bit more, oh, some of the dorm buildings or something like that. A chapel would be nice. I'm going to add chapel to my search. Ooh, nice. So let's go with, it really doesn't matter. We just need an image that's different than the other images. I'm going to go with the old Frost Chapel outside picture here. And I'm going to drag that. It's 1,000 pixels, so it's good enough. Although that's a terrible saturation picture. Whoever took that must have been using the $50 DoorDash camera. That is brutal. So washed out. So let's grab a third picture. And let's minimize our Google search window. And let's open that up in Photoshop. So File, Open, or drag it down to the PS and open it. And now we're going to see our lasso tools, because there's magnetic, there's polygon, and there's traditional lasso. So let's just start with the old traditional lasso tool. So if I need to select pixels in a shape, I use the marquee tools, rectangle, circle. If I need to be a little bit more free-forming with how I select pixels inside my image, I'll use one of the lasso tools. So let's just do with the old regular lasso tool here. And I just want you to take your mouse over your image and just draw an organic shape. So you can just see I'm just drawing an organic shape. The minute you let your mouse go, it's going to connect the dots back to where the lasso tool started. So at any point in time, if you let your mouse go, it's just going to connect the dots and go right to where you started your lasso tool. So let's just draw a little organic shape. If you don't like it, tap your mouse outside into the little pasteboard area to deselect, and you select deselect, and then draw another shape. And once we have our little shape drawn, let's do Command C to copy it. And let's go into our untitled document, and let's do Command V. And you should get something that looks a little bit like that. Now we have an organic shape. So let's go back to our organic selection shape on the image. So let's go back to the image that we opened up with our organic shape. And let's just draw another one. So let's tap, and then let's just draw another organic shape and get a selection.
The first one you did look like a duck.
You did?
Well, it's gone, but the first one did.
The little silhouette?
Yeah.
The silhouette shape. All right, now, if we're using a lasso tool to make a selection, it is free-forming. If we miss part of our image, so let's say we draw a little selection area and we're kind of selecting a little something inside our image, but we don't get all of the image. If you hold the Shift key down, your lasso tool turns into a lasso tool with a plus. So let's hold the Shift key down, and you'll notice the lasso tool has a plus. The plus is to add to our selection. So watch what happens if I start outside my document and just circle a little bit inside of the shape. So if I just go like this, holding down Shift, I can add to my selection. So if I'm selecting with a free-form selection tool, like the lasso tool, or the magnetic lasso tool, or the polygon lasso tool, and I didn't get part of the image I wanted to select, I can always hold the Shift key down and add to my selection. Because remember, what's inside the marching ants is all we're selecting in this image. So let's hold down Shift and add some extra areas to your organic shape, just so that you can see how to add to your selection area. Now, if there's an area of your selection area that you don't want to include, you can hold the Option key down, and that becomes the minus. So Shift is plus, Option is minus. So now watch what happens if I circle part of my selection area, it removes it from my selection area. So if there was a part of this that I drew that I did not love, or I didn't selected too much of it, I can use the option key. Where the option key comes in handy. If you're trying to cut something out, but you have a little bit of white background on the edge of your image because you didn't select it perfectly, the option key can help you add or subtract. So remove the white around the little edge of your image. If you're selecting something and like part of the shirt doesn't get selected in the person, you can have the shift key and circle around the little void in the shirt, like a button or something, and it will add it to the selection area. Shift adds, option subtract. So let's just go ahead and copy this shape. Let's go back to our untitled. Let's paste it on. Now, when you are collaging in Photoshop, which means bringing pixels from other places into one place, best practice is to move back to the Move tool once you bring an object into your composition. So once we copy and paste in, we need to switch back to the Move tool so that we can move that object around. If you stay on the Lasso tool, you're going to then start trying to select areas of that layer without moving it around or doing anything with it. So in my brain, I always default to the Move tool while I'm composing inside of Photoshop. So let's go back to the Move tool, and let's move that shape around. So we'll move that one. We'll move this one. And this is what I mean by smart select. You can tap on your layer objects and it will select them and give you a bounding box. I actually don't love that feature because students sometimes get confused because they think they're manipulating a certain layer, but with their Move tool they tapped on an object in their composition and it switched your layer. So let's just name layer number 1 Lasso 1, and let's name layer number 2 Lasso 2. Now, once you copy and paste, those pixels are in your document. So that object is in your document. If you ever bring something in and you're not quite sure if you want to use that object or that layer inside of your design, you can always click the little eyeball next to the layer and hide it. So let's click the little eyeball next to both of your lasso layers and just hide them. It doesn't mean the pixels went anywhere, it just means you can't see them. And if you were to export this file, that layer would not go with it. Once you hide it and you export it as a PDF or a JPEG or some kind of image compression like you do for the web, that layer is not part of it. It flattens it without it, it exports it without it, it makes it all one object without that hidden layer. So you can always bring things in and test them around a little bit, but it doesn't mean you have to love them. You can always hide it, you can always bring the object in again, you can always try a different selection technique. Just remember, you can't scale up. And you want to hold down the Option key if you're going to scale something down so that it kind of squishes it from center. You don't want to distort things in Photoshop. So you don't want to scale up, and you don't want to just grab a middle handle in that box and go, I need this much space, let me just squish this image into this much space. That's how you get like a golden retriever that looks like a hot dog dog. Right? You squish the image and all of a sudden this dog becomes like really skinny and really long. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you scale proportionately in all programs, but really in Photoshop because they're pixels. So once you squish it, it's squished. There's no going back. Once you scale it up really big, it's blurry. There's no going back. You have to bring that object back in at its original resolution to do anything with it. So stacks of pieces of paper, selecting them and bringing them in, and organizing them from background to foreground. Illustrator is interesting because it just puts everything on the document for you. It just puts everything on the document for you. So you have to do object arrange, bring to front, object arrange, send to back, but it's all in one layer. Unless you create additional layers, it puts everything on one layer. Photoshop is couldn't be further from the spectrum. It puts everything on its own layer. So you have to select everything independently. Okay, so we've got the move tool, we've got layers, we have bounding boxes around the objects on our layers when we select them with the move tool. So you can scale and rotate, squish down, don't squish up, hold down Option to make sure this thing scales proportionately from the middle so everything's nice and perfect and looks good. We've used the rectangular tool to select pixels. We've used the circle or elliptical tool to select pixels. And we've used the lasso tool so far to select pixels. Now, you have two more lasso tools in here. One is the polygon lasso, and the other one is the magnetic. Let's switch to the polygon lasso. Now, if your image that you picked most recently isn't like a building that has like roof lines and kind of walls, grab one of those, because the polygon lasso tool is really good for selecting objects that have straight lines. A stop sign, a building, a roadway, like that goes off in the distance. The polygon lasso is a really good tool for selecting things that have a straight line. So let's make sure we have at least a building that has like a roof and some pitches and things like that. And let's go to that picture inside of Photoshop. So let's make sure we have just that one open. So if you still have this building, because this is the one you picked, we can always go to Select, Deselect, or Command D and kind of turn that off because we have to make a new selection. Now, polygon is exactly how it sounds it would be. It makes a selection area based on straight lines. And the reason I said a building was because if I tap my mouse down at the corner of this building and drag my mouse up, it draws a line. So you see how I can just follow the building. And every time I tap my mouse, it puts a point so that it can change directions. And so I'm just going to make a rough shape of this because we're going to see how we can add and subtract. So I can always Command plus and zoom in a little bit. I can always use my space bar to pan around a little bit, but I'm going to stay on my polygon. I can already see I missed part of the roof line there. So Command plus zooms in. And so I'm just going to do a rough shape. And you can always hold the space bar down and it turns into a grabber hand. And it'll allow you to kind of pan or drag around your page. So I'm just going to start at the beginning and I'm going to draw straight lines and I'm going to go all the way back to where I started. And when you get back to where you started, you're going to see a little white circle that appears next to your lasso tool. That's basically asking you, do you want to close your selection? So if you click your little mouse, it'll then draw the marching ants around your selection. So you can see mine. At any point in time, you can do Command D, but you don't really need to because we can always add and subtract your selection. So it really doesn't matter how good of a job you did because we do have the ability to add to our selection and subtract from our selection. So let's see how you do kind of following around the building. So shape tools draw shape selection areas. Lasso tools draw organic selection areas. Regular lasso, really organic. Polygon lasso, straight line organic. And we'll see magnetic lasso in a minute. So the top two tools below the move tool are ways to select pixels, which is vital in Photoshop because it is a pixel-based program. Once you have your polygon lasso selection created, let's zoom in a little bit. And with the marching ant still marching, let's switch to the regular magnetic lasso tool. Now, if you see an area in your image, let's do Command plus, hold down the space bar, so we can move around the image a little bit. If you see an area of the image that you like missed a little bit of the building, with the regular lasso tool, let's hold down the shift key and let's circle the area of the image that you missed and add it to the selection. Let's hold the option key down and let's remove the area of the image selection area that you don't want. Shift to add, option to remove. Now you'll notice when I do the shift key, I start outside of my selection area and draw the shape that I need to add. If I'm subtracting and I hold the option key down, I start inside the selection area. So you see how I start inside and circle the area I want to remove. Shift to add, option to subtract. Now the key with Photoshop is how well you can select pixels, because if it isn't a good selection, then you're going to see parts of the image in the collage that you don't want. So like if I'm cutting out this building but I don't get right on the edge of the building, I'm going to get parts of the trees. Well, when you bring that into your composition, you're going to get building with parts of a tree. Odds are that's not going to look very good, because you want the building to be a nice, clean selection of just the building. And you can use more than one selection tool. So we started with the polygon, but now we've moved to the regular lasso tool to add and subtract from the selection. So I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to include this little area of the building. I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to remove the little area of the trees that I don't want. So I'm just going to go around the building perimeter and see if there's an area I have to remove. Hold down Option. And an area I have to add. Hold down Shift. You can always zoom in, Command plus, space bar to pan around. Like this one's terrible, so let's do the Option key, and I'm just going to follow right along the pitch of this roof. Hold down the space bar, go to the Option key, remove this area of the sky. Hold down the Shift key, add this little part of the tower. Option key subtract, Shift key add. Now you're going to see how well you did when you copy your pixels into your image, because you're going to see the areas that you're like, oh, I should not have had that be part of my image. Or, yay, I did a good job with that part of my image. Now, you'll notice where light goes to dark, that's called stepping inside an image. So when there are little squares of dark next to light, what Photoshop is trying to do is follow the line of dark and light. So the image has a step in it, pixel step. And so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to hold down the Option key. And so let's just slowly work our way around and do the very best we can at trying to do a selection box around the building. I actually think I'm going to, in my picture, end my building at this nice clean line right here, so that I don't have a weird tree cluster in the corner of my picture. So I ended my selection box. Now the beauty is, if you added a little too much, then hold down the Option key and remove a little bit much. Command plus is your friend. Zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. Space bar is your friend. Pinch and pan, pinch and pan. So the closer you are, the easier you can see the pixels, which means you can tell what part of the pixels should be included and what part of the pixels should not be included. Shift adds, Option subtracts. Now, we're gonna see select subject here in a minute. You're gonna be like, why did you even have me draw with the lasso tool? And then try to add and subtract to my selection. Because no matter how smart Photoshop is, it never can make a perfect selection for you. There's always some part of it that has to be added or subtracted to your selection. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. That's why you see a lot of ads with a background image and little square images. Because once you know those two basic tools, you can create a composition. You make the size of the ad the background image, and then you copy and paste in other pictures in little squares and rectangles. You see that every single day in advertising. Now, those that know Photoshop a little bit, you start getting like people cutouts and put in other scenes. You start getting more of an integrated narrative. When you cut objects out and you bring them into a new picture, you start to tell a story. When you just draw rectangles and copy and paste pictures in, it's just like a little picture window of pictures stacked on top of the background image. There isn't the same interaction or depth of picture. So, basic Photoshop, cut rectangles and circles out, bring the pictures in, and put them on top of your background image. A little bit more experience, a little bit more comfort level in Photoshop. You start cutting people out, cutting objects out, cutting specific things out, and bringing them into your picture to tell a story, to tell a narrative. The better the pictures are cut out, the better the narrative. So if you have a picture of a park and you want to put someone flying a kite in the park, you've got to do a pretty good job cutting the picture of the person, the string to the kite, and the kite itself, because once you bring it in, it's going to try to integrate into the picture of the park. Now there are tricks as we move along a little bit over the weeks in Photoshop that we'll learn about blending things together and making them feel more like from the same picture. But really, what we're learning today is the very basis of Photoshop. Little squares of color, selecting them, copying, pasting them, editing, transforming them, manipulating them. It's the same no matter how good you are with photo-based design or how simple you are with photo-based design. It's exactly, we're all doing the same thing. It's the depth of skill at combining pixels that makes someone more connected to the final solution. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with a background graphic and a couple of rectangle pictures if they're put appropriately with some words to tell a story. So you will see that a lot in advertising. Just little pictures cut out in circles and rectangles and put on top of background images. So that's really basement level 1 of Photoshop, but it still can be very effective. You see it every single day in advertising. Now, when you start blending pictures together from different places to tell one story, that's where you start to get in a little bit more depth. I always see the Cirque du Soleil ads in my social media, and it's always the dancers and all the fancy costumes put into some artificial environment, like an illustration of plants or a big pool of water with a reflection. That's a picture of a pool of water and a picture of the dancer or the actor or actress, and that person's cut out and put into that picture. Now, how well it's done is how it looks like it was always there. It looks like it was one picture. Our goal is for your Photoshop to look like it was always one picture. That's the trick. How we select, how we copy, how we edit, how we manipulate pixels. How well we do that is how well we make it look like it was always one picture. Now AI is getting a little bit interesting because you type in like, give me a cat wearing a crown, standing in front of a castle, with a reflection moat with his reflection in the water. And it tries. It tries. The computer tries. And in some cases it does okay. Normally it adds like too many whiskers, or the crown is the wrong direction, or there's always something that AI can't quite figure out yet. Adobe has what's called Firefly, and it will allow you to tell it what to do, and it will try to do some of it for you. It's not really that good yet. Everything I've tried with it, it looks very hokey, and it's a little bit weird, and it's all stock imagery. It's all from its library that is built into the program. But it's going to get there eventually. So learning the process of how to do it manually and making that part of your creative process is really important, because eventually you'll be able to tell something to do it, but it's the idea of what you see that's going to make it really valuable, make it important. Okay, so let's see how you did. We have kind of a selection box now, so let's do Command C, and let's go back to our untitled and do Command V. And once you paste it in, let's go to the Move tool. So here it is. If I put it towards the bottom, it looks like maybe it was always there. Let me turn off my circle. Mine has kind of a flat baseline, so I had to move it to the bottom because it would look kind of weird there. So I'm just going to move it down here into the corner of the trees, like
So
it's
natural.
like it's peeking into the picture. Now, you'll probably see the colors are different, the lighting is different, it's a different time of day. Like, those are all things we would have to address in our composition to make it feel like it was always one picture. And you obviously know it's not all one picture, because that chapel is not sitting on a hill or the Ford complex. Like, that's not it. But people that don't know that might think, wow, Chip, you took a great photo there. You captured the chapel and the buildings back there. Like, this is great. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and you can too, just to see where you might have went wrong. So I'm going to zoom in and hold the space bar, and let's see if we have any areas of the trees or something. I actually have a little pixel up there that is the wrong color. You can see a little bit of white here on the edge of mine. So these are just things to recognize when you're cutting objects out from one place to another. Could I delete that little area right there that I don't like in my picture once I bring it into this picture?
No.
Are there pixels on that layer in this document? Yeah. So watch if I move my lasso
It
tool.
won't remove them from the background because
Nope.
of what you talked about.
See, I can just circle that, hit delete. So at any point in time when I compose my image in my new document, if there's an area I need to delete, clean up a little bit, I can always do it once it's in here. I can't add pixels from the other picture and bring them in here easily, because when I copied it, I only copied the pixels inside the selection area. So if I truly did a really bad job and I missed part of the building, I need to go back to my original image and make sure I add that part. Because once you copy it in, you can only select and remove areas that don't look good once it's in as its own layer. So you can only manipulate the pixels that exist on that layer. So in essence, you're cleaning away negative space that you didn't do a good job with.
Will you ever only be on one layer at a time, or is it possible to be on like multiple layers at once?
So you're only on one layer at a time. If there's a reason to have those layers together, you can do what's called merging them. And then you have access to the pixels. The trick with merging them is any pixels under the two objects you're merging, bye-bye. So if part of it overlaps the image and you merge that pixels underneath the image that you're merging is gone. They're gone, permanently gone. So I only merge when I'm like wrapping up the end of what I'm doing. You need to be independently selecting layers. Let's name that layer to church. All right, so we have the Move tool to move layers around. Every time you click on an object in your design, the Smart Selection goes to that layer to move things around. Just know that when you're clicking around your document. We have our selection marquees. So we can draw rectangles and circles or ellipses. Remember, you're only selecting what's inside the marching ants, but those are shape-based selections. So if you want to cut a little square or rectangle out of an image and bring that thing into your layout, very easy to do with the selection tool. When you hold down Option, it draws a perfect circle. Hold down Option, it draws from the center a perfect square. Shift helps you with that alignment. You can always add holding down Shift, or subtract holding down Option. So that's kind of how you can add and subtract from your selection. The other really important selection tool inside of your selection bar is the magic wand tool. Now, The magic wand tool allows you to select a range of pixels. Now, the last lasso tool inside of your lasso selection is magnetic. The reason I'm kind of not going over magnetic is because magnetic will follow the edge of an object the same way select object will, select subject. So it does kind of the same thing, but it's a newer feature in Photoshop that has some really good functionality. So the lasso tool and polygon are probably the two lasso tools you'll use the most to try to select something. The magnetic follows the shape of the building, but you can do that with select subject. So in the fourth toolbar tool, if you click and hold your mouse down, you're going to see magic wand. Magic wand. Now, in order to do magic wand the easiest way, we need to find something with a white background. So let's go out in our internet search and let's grab the Berry College logo, the circle one, the crest, and see if we can find that image and bring that in. And we'll try a cow and stuff too, but let's start with a simple logo. So I'm going to go back up to my search requirements and I'm going to do Berry College logo. Now, we actually can use any of the logos that have a white background. So even the crest with the bee, the little Viking guy that's kind of circular, the little crest here that has kind of the Latin at the top and the symbols. We can use the circle one. We can use any of the ones that have a white background. See, this one's actually transparent. You can see the little checkerboard there. This one has a white background. This one, ooh, transparent. Has a transparent background. Let's pick one that doesn't have a checkerboard because transparent will be very easy for us. So let's see what we have here. I'm going to grab, let me see about, maybe I'll grab the Viking guy. So let me close this. And I'm going to grab this little Viking guy right here. So let's drag and drop him over to the desktop. Don't pick any of the logos that have the checkerboard in the background because that's transparent. I will show you that in a second, but let's use the magic wand tool first for selecting. So pick any Berry College logo that has just a white background around it, not a checkerboard. So that one has a white background. This one is transparent, which is beautiful, but we will see that one in a second. All right, so let's open up whatever logo you save to the desktop that has a white background. Let's open that up in Photoshop so we can take a look at the magic wand tool. Now, when you select the magic wand tool, you're going to notice the properties for the tool are running along the top here. Now, the number you need to be aware of, or the property setting in the magic wand tool that you need to be aware of, is tolerance. Tolerance means the range of a color that you want to select when you use your magic wand tool. The bigger the number, the bigger the range. So the magic wand is like tapping on one pixel in your picture. So if you tap on one pixel and that pixel's white, the higher the number, the more shades of white it will select inside of its selection. The lower the number, the smaller the range of color around that pixel you tap on. Even though the magic wand's kind of big, it's really tapping on one pixel. And it's collecting the range of that color inside of your image based on the tolerance. So probably by default, yours is set to probably somewhere in the 30 range. Let's crank that down to 5. So highlight the tolerance and change it to like 5. And once the wand is set to a tolerance of 5, take your wand and tap it in the white area of the image. Now, depending on what your logo was that you used, you may have the inside of the image selected also, because it's also white, right? Now, let's deselect by tapping our mouse outside of the image, and let's crank this up to 32 and tap the mouse. When you have a blue and white, black and white, simple silhouetted shape, it doesn't matter whether your tolerance 1 or 100. It's going to grab every white pixel inside of your image if your image is blue and white. Now, the reason I tapped on the white or the background is because I actually want to select the blue, not the white. So when I select an object on a white background, I'll use the magic wand tool to select the white, but then I'll do what's called inverting or inversing the selection to grab what isn't white. So once you tap your little magic wand tool in the white area, you should get all of the white that's inside your image. Let's do select inverse. So we are going to invert our selection. So now it should have just the blue selected. So images on white backgrounds are really easy to cut out if you select the white and then invert the selection. So if you have a cow on a white background and you click the magic wand tool on the white and do select inverse, you select the cow, and we're actually going to do that in a minute. The magic wand tool is great for solid background objects, or objects that are sitting on really light or really dark areas, because it will allow you to select part of that image and invert it, the part you do not want. So you see lots of images on black and white backgrounds. Yes?
With the magic tool, could you do like select option and deselect a portion of our image?
Yes. So let's say you used the selection tool and you clicked on the white and then you inverted the selection, but there was an area in that now selection area that you don't want. You can go to the lasso tool, hold down option, circle the area you don't want. Hold down shift, circle the area and you do one. Oftentimes you need probably 2 selection tools in order to do the selection area that you want to do. These are the best starting point practices, but you can always add and subtract. Always have shift, always have option. The trick with doing shift or option with the wand tool is every time you change the tolerance, if you want to subtract and you tap on something, it's going to select anything that has that shade or range of color. All right, so let's copy that logo. However, you have the selection area by inverting it. So select the white background, invert it, copy it, go into our design. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to paste it. And I'm going to move to my move tool, and here's my little logo. And you'll notice, but I don't know if you can tell, if I zoom really far in, I have white pixels right there. I don't know why it selected that one little area of pixels, but I could now go in, because it's a straight line, and with my rectangular marquee tool, oh, wrong layer, and delete those pixels. So the magic wand tool is great for solid backgrounds, because you can always select the solid background and then invert the selection.
How can you choose multiple things to select?
So yes. So if your magic wand tool only selected, let's say, the crest over there, you can hold down shift and click on each one of those letters and add those to your selection. So if you have a more complicated logo that has like a crest and text, and you click on the white and do select inverse and it doesn't grab something that you want, you can always hold down the shift key and add to your selection.
Okay.
You can always have the shift key and add it with the lasso tool. You can always do the shift key and add it with the rectangular. You can always use the shift key or the option key and subtract with the ellipse. It's whatever that tool is that you feel most comfortable with removing or adding pixels to your selection. I typically bounce back to the lasso tool because my hand is really good. So if there's an area I need to add or subtract, I can do it with the lasso tool. So I'll use whatever the best tool is to start my selection area, and then I'll add or subtract with the lasso tool based on what I need. Now, while you're doing that or messing around with that, grab one of the logos that has a transparent background. Because you see the checkerboard, like this circle? Look at when I drag it over the desktop. It has no background. It's a PNG. So if I open that in Photoshop, it has a checkerboard around it. It's fully transparent. PNGs can have transparencies. If I do select all, Command A, and Command C to copy it, look at how it comes in. So if you find an image that's a .png and it has a little checkerboard inside of the image, it means that image is transparent. If you open that image in Photoshop and just do Command A, Command C, and go into your collage and do Command V, you will get a fully transparent image without having to do any selecting. So every student in first add design class, first thing they start to create something, they grab images that are empty, that are transparent, because you don't have to do any selecting other than Command A, Command C with an image that is transparent. Anything that has a checkerboard, I did no selecting of that image. I just grabbed the transparent or the PNG, put it on the desktop, opened it up in Photoshop, and did Command A, Command C, which is select all and copy, and then I went into my document and did Command V, and this thing is beautifully transparent. Like, look at that. No skill required. So when you're collaging logos and illustrations and things that have white or transparent backgrounds, looking for something in your search that is large in size and includes the word transparency or transparent, you are going to get some awesome, easy to compose images. So hence the brand manual. The reason there's a brand manual is because the logos are vector logos that have transparency in them. So they're either EPS files, SVG files, PNG files, or GIFs, and they all have transparency. So the logo is perfect without having to do anything. I wonder if we can find a cow on a white background. We need a cow in this picture. So let's see, cow on white background. Some photographer had to, aha! Look at that. Tons of cows on white backgrounds. I love it. Tons of cows on white background. Let's see how big they are. 750, 500. These guys aren't very big. Oh, 1300. So you can imagine cutting this cow out on the white background using the magic wand tool. See how high my tolerance is? It selects the white inside the cow. So let's see what happens if I do 10. Ooh, much better. Let's try 5. Oh, it's a fine line we dance. 7. Ooh, better. I'm going to do select inverse and see how much of the cow I have. Now you're going to see these little weird pixels out here. I'm going to switch to my lasso tool and hold down Option and just remove that from the selection. I'm just going to circle the little areas of pixels that I don't want it inside my selection. Oop, I got an area on his nose I need to include. So things on white backgrounds become a lot easier to select by using the magic wand tool and doing select inverse. So if you're searching for something to put in your picture and it's an object of some kind, a person, someone doing something, a chair, a couch. I could have put a couch in the trees. If you first search for something and include white background or transparent in your search, you're going to get things with the removal of the background, or images easy to remove the background, because the Magic Wand tool will give you the ability to select that. And I say green screen, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're taking the actor, the animal, whatever that thing is, and we're getting an image in an environment that makes it easy to select the object. If this cow is in a field with 10 cows around it, the odds of you being able to get the image, full image, all the legs, the tail, the ears, without a cow in front of it, a tree in front of it, a leaf in front of it, a hill in front of it, it is a lot more difficult. So if you need to include a person or an object or some kind of thing to include in your image, and it's only the thing, it isn't the thing in a background, you're not selecting the thing in a background. Like we cut the actors and actresses in front of the mill. Well, we needed the mill and the people. I wasn't trying to just cut out the mill, but if I was trying to cut out the mill, I would see if I could find a picture of the mill or a mill already on a white background, or take a picture of the mill without people walking in front of it, so that I could try to cut out the mill all by itself. Because once the trees are in there, it becomes tricky. Once there's busy backgrounds, it becomes tricky. Once the image you're trying to cut out is the same color as the background, it becomes tricky. So if this cow's picture is at night, obviously the background's going to be dark and the spots are dark. It makes it really difficult because all of the pixels are in the same range of color. There's no defined edge to that. So I'm going to copy this dude, bring him into my, I got to close some of these things. I got too many tabs going on here. So I'm going to close some of my tabs up here. Too many tabs. Let's paste the old cow. Oh my gosh, he's itty bitty. He's hanging out over here by the reflection pool.
I think you should make this the actual Barry logo.
Oh,
We should put this on the website.
yeah, there you go. The logo should have a cow in the middle of it, I feel like. Although I should have went with Angus, not the old black and white cow. I need the black cow because I didn't see any black and white cows on this campus. We don't have any black and white cows, do we? They're all Angus? They're all black cows?
I think so.
Huh. Interesting. Now, let's see if we can find a deer, because I want to show you select subject. So let's go back to our search, and let's just type in deer. Now, let's find a picture of a deer that isn't on a white background, but is in like a field all by itself. So something not in a white background, but in like a field all by itself. So if you just do the old standard deer search, you're going to get a bunch of pictures like this. This little dude right here, how big is he? 350. He's not big enough. I got to change my search tool and make sure this is large. All right, so now we got some bigger deer here. So I got this dude, he's 1600 pixels. He's in a field, he's all by himself. I feel like I might be able to do something with this guy. So let's save him to the desktop, and then let's open him up in Photoshop. Now, the reason I did not show the magnetic lasso, if you pick your Magic Wand tool, you either have a select subject button down here or a select subject button in your properties. Just depends on whether that select subject panel is open. So you either have select subject up here or select subject down here, or both places. So let's just click the select subject button. Let's see what it does, other than the wheel of death. So you probably got a pretty good starting selection to your deer. if it was in the field and didn't have a bunch of deer in front of it. Select subject is in essence the evolution of magnetic lasso. Magnetic lasso will try to follow the edge of a shape based on the shape in comparison to the background. Now Photoshop has select subject. Does it do the best of the best? It tries. Now where the hair towards the tail feathers into the field, it looks like there's a little notch in the antler that it didn't understand. It doesn't mean I don't have to go back to my lasso tool and add and subtract from my selection. But Photoshop is getting smarter at its ability to recognize objects. So if there's a person walking down the street, or an animal like a squirrel on a tree or something like that, it will do a pretty good starting point for your selection area in order to kind of get you started. The bottom line is you still have to add and subtract from selection areas because it can't figure it all out. If the color of pixels are really close in range, the software doesn't know that that's not part of the antler and it's part of the trees. It doesn't know that that hair at the end of the tail isn't part of the wheat field in the background. It can't do it all. But you can get pretty close to getting started with your select subject. So the deer is pretty well cut out. So I'm going to go ahead just exactly the way he is and do Command C and go back to my untitled and do Command V. And here he is. Now you can see the wheat inside of there. So I could move it down. You can see a little space inside the antler that I've got to clean up. It did cut the tail off a bit, but I don't know necessarily if that's bad. I could always move him over here. You don't even see his tail. Kind of hide him over here. But you can start to see the manipulation of pixels, how selecting them works, how bringing them into one composition works. The importance of resolution. The better your picture, the bigger it comes into your composition. And it all starts with your composition's properties. The higher the DPI, or dots per inch, the more quality of image you need. If we would have set this to 72 DPI as a document, this deer would have come in looking like Godzilla. He would have been enormous in the picture because he's 1600 pixels wide. Now, does it look like it's just cookie cutter magazine shapes that you cut out and slapped into your composition? Absolutely. It looks like we're just cutting out silhouettes of things and pasting them onto a photo to make it look like a story. The evolution is blending those things into your image, which we will learn as we evolve a little bit in Photoshop. But it's really important in Photoshop Class 1 to know that the Move tool moves the objects on your layer. The rectangular and elliptical shape tool draws pixel selections based on a square, rectangle, circle, ellipse. That the lasso tools are free-forming lasso tools to select objects in a given photo to bring into another photo. The regular lasso tool is as good as your hand is. The polygon lasso tool is a great starting point for objects that have sharp edges to get you started. More times than not, you have to use Shift to add to your selection, and Option to remove from your selection once you create a selection box or shape. Lastly, we move to the lasso tool. The lasso tool is to extract objects out of solid backgrounds. You use the magic wand tool based on the tolerance. The higher the number, the more range of color. The lower the number, the smaller the range of color. And you select the background first and select inverse the background to get the object. So if you have a gorilla and you want to put a banana in their hand, you find a banana with a white background, you select the white background first with the magic wand, you do select inverse, you select the banana, and then you put the banana by copying and paste it into the gorilla picture, and you can put the banana in the gorilla's hand. So, magic wand is great for that. The very last tool we learned was select subject. Using the magic wand tool, it gives you the ability to have Photoshop try to select the primary subject inside your photo. It's a good starting point. It will give you the general shape. If it's a person with wispy hair, you'll get the basic person. You may have to do a little work on the wispy hair. It'll try to do a firm edge around it. Now, next class, we're going to learn about the eraser tool and the text tool, ways to add words and ways to remove areas of your picture without drawing shapes. We can use a brush to remove areas, kind of drawing like. So let's save this file. We're at almost 1050. Let's save this file just so we have it as reference. So just save this as Berry Collage. You can save it to the desktop. And then next class, we're going to kind of learn a couple of new tools. So we're going to kind of baby step through this. And we're also going to copy your logo from your nonprofit and paste it into a photo. So make sure that you have your nonprofit logo with next class, because we're gonna mock up a couple of things with your logo inside of Photoshop so you can see how Smart Objects works, how vector objects work. And so let's save this, and when you're okay and you're good with the practicing, I'll see you guys on Thursday. How did you fare in the storm, Roger? Were you?
There barely was any. There was, well, all right, so there was the night of like Thursday through Friday.
Yeah.
But then after that, kind of.
No real yard
down.
damage or anything like
We
that?
had some limbs fall.
That's it?
Nothing too bad.
No real water or anything?
We have a little area in our ditch that kind of gets filled up a little bit.
But not too
it
bad.
didn't get too
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, I'll see you on Thursday. Have a good day, gang. Well, we'll see who loves Photoshop at the end. It's a little bit easier in some instances. A little bit easier. All right, gang, have a good day. Hey, did you have to move that camera in the hurricane or whatever?
No, well, yeah.
Did he still end up doing that? I was thinking about you guys
I
because you were...
still had work, and I didn't leave until 7, so I was walking home in the rain.
Oh, that's brutal.
I texted Mercy, I was like, if I get sick,
Yeah, it's on you, dude.
if I get sick, I'm logging hours. I was like, oh, I'm at work.
Exactly. All right.
See ya.
Have a good one. See ya. How are you doing? Okay?
Good, yeah. It's getting to that point in the semester where just very busy.
Yeah.
Very tired.
Volleyball and traveling and all that stuff.
Yeah. Just a little overwhelming sometimes, but
Yeah, and then a job if you got one of those. Like, I
yeah.
try to take that on into account because Barry is a little different than the university I came from. Like, students didn't juggle sports and jobs and all that stuff. It was like sports in school or maybe some volunteer stuff.
Yeah.
But not like job, sports, school.
Yeah. And then it's like all the extra things that all the very kids do.